Even if you've never played this game or heard of it, these lessons can be generalized across all stories from novels, films, to video games. For when a story knows its philosophical dilemma, they may piss off a lot of their own fans and viewers, but for any creation, staying true to the motif is way more important than appeasing your base audience, but more likely to deliver you a misunderstood masterpiece, like The Last of Us Part 2. I'm a filmmaker, cinephile, and gamer, but what I enjoy most about games and the single-player adventures I go on is the story. Now obviously great gameplay is important, and it is beyond phenomenal on this game, with its varied and grounded sense of violence, which I will touch on only as it pertains to the characters and how it serves the greater narrative arc. But I want to view this game not even like a film per se, but more like a TV show, as it is the most befitting comparison. And if you don't know, HBO is making a TV show now with Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey as Joel and Ellie, the two leads, that should be out sometime next year. So the story from the first game, released in 2013, broke a lot of people down, in that I think I welled up, almost cried within the first 15 minutes of the game. And now, because they've just rebuilt the game from the ground up for the PlayStation 5, which I'm currently replaying, so I won't spoil for you exactly why that it's such a beautiful and dark, tragic story beat. And if you know, you know, but it was a turning point in gaming history that a studio like Naughty Dog, not necessarily known for creating drama, could take a kid's toy, the format of a video game, and deliver a gut punch of an experience, an emotional roller coaster that excelled in every aspect of story, adventure, horror, and amazing gameplay. So much so that it created an avid, religiously devoted fan base that grows every year. And this I'll touch on later too. But this took gaming from a child's toy to an immersive existential experience for a grown person, where the story conveyed as much meaning, beauty, and heartache as anything you'd watch on television or in the theater. And because of this moment, like a meteor striking a whole industry, the eruption resonated across a whole community of gamers and now die-hard Last of Us fans. So it makes sense why there was a remaster of the game and now a remake. But what seemingly is an impossible feat, and something that just by mere mention the idea was controversial, they made a sequel. So you can see the cards were stacked against them from the jump, to make a sequel that delivered for the fans to continue the almost perfect and somewhat complete story arc of the first story, and attempt to prove upon the flawless. Very few sequels within any medium, from music to movies, succeed ever. You can probably count on one hand how many sequels that were better than their predecessors. There's obviously Empire Strikes Back, The Godfather Part 2, Terminator 2, and maybe The Dark Knight. There's probably a few more, but it's a few and far between. But within each of these, there's a clear evolution of stories, and not necessarily any fundamental risks taken, especially with their characters. The same characters that the audiences already have such a deep attachment to, and the reason they are picking to experience the story in sequel form again. The audience wants to see their beloved characters, basically in just a new setting with pretty much the same obstacle types, maybe a new villain to defeat, or a more expanded universe to explore with like new weapons or abilities that they gained from the first story, along with a new impediment to balance their new ability. But for God's sake, just leave the hero roughly as they are. The Last of Us 2 didn't do that necessarily. Sure, you get to play as Ellie, and you get to be with Joel a bit. You get some new abilities, and you can jump. But you basically are exploring a very similar world with very similar enemy types, with just modern improvements. But where maybe they took some inspiration to shake things up was at the time when they were developing their story, there was a trend in television, which was simply, don't be afraid to shock the audience. Don't be afraid to kill your darlings, to slay that what you love the most. And as I keep coming back to replaying The Last of Us Part 2 as well, I think of the Charles Bukowski quote, "Find what you love and let it kill you." And I won't beat around the bush, but this is your warning now. If you've managed to not have this game spoiled, Part 2 that is, please turn this off. Play the game and come back, but you have been warned. So Naughty Dog did the unimaginable. They killed off their main protagonist, which sounds too clinical like that, because what they really did was they stabbed us in the heart. They killed off Joel, the flawed friend we grew to love, the overprotective dad we wish we had, the brother we could go through hell with, and the man many of us wish we were. And in killing Joel, they killed a piece of me, a piece of each of us who fell in love with the first game, the reason for our devotion. He was sacrificed at the altar of a good story to save us, but they didn't stop there. They also took our baby Ellie, our sister in arms, our warrior goddess, the one that could literally save the world, cleanse the sins of the planet, the true martyr that we couldn't let die. And they made her suffer, tortured her, her spirit, her soul, her body, beyond recognition, and made her witness the brutal murder of her protector, Joel, right in front of her eyes. And who would have the gall to cause such suffering? Who would Naughty Dog create that could be so vile and villainous? What sort of enemy type would do that? And if you already weren't pissed off with how things were going, they really wanted to rub your face in it, didn't they? So who was that dreadful character that we are meant to loathe beyond measure? Well, that character was us. Naughty Dog put the control in our hand, put us behind that villain, Abby, now maybe the most hated character in video game history. They handed the game over to her, to us, and then attempted the near impossible, giving her the whole back half of the game, trying to make us care, and worse yet, understand Abby's motivation for killing Joel, and maybe even having sympathy for her. Well, balls for Neil Druckmann, the creative director and mastermind of The Last of Us, and his crew of co-writers. It's like they brainstormed, what's the worst thing that we could possibly do to this franchise, and what's the hardest task we could give ourselves as writers? Well, first, let's kill Joel, remove our heart from the story, and then have us play as our killer so we can have compassion for her brutal act. And yeah, let's try to do that. Again, this was written during the era of HBO and the like, where killing off their top-billed stars and the most pivotal characters as a means to shock the audience was sort of commonplace. It usually took place during the season finale to get you hyped for the upcoming season, which would have made a lot of sense to do it here if you think about it. You play the whole game as Joel and Ellie in tandem until the very end, the climax where this is the bloody goodbye to our beloved, and then you shit yourself with theories, endless discussion threads, and healthy debates about what The Last of Us 3 would be like without Joel. And then from a pure economic standpoint, it would be a much smarter move. Yet, what filled the online discussion threads in its stead, well, was pure vitriol and troll-spoiling misogyny. It was honestly stupid and gross, and still is, sort of, especially in regards to Abby and her physique. But I can't blame the gamer for reacting intensely, because in many ways Naughty Dog intended to invoke, let's just say, strong feelings whilst playing the game, and that was a very deliberate choice. But to be clear, Neil Druckmann did not, like most TV shows, just want to shock us. No, in fact, it was so much more. They knew they couldn't repeat their theme and motif of the first game, which was roughly something akin to the lengths you'll go to protect that which you love the most. So they couldn't repeat that theme, but they could add to it, which The Last of Us 2's theme does. And it could be described as something like, we all think we are heroes fighting for a universal cause, but in truth, all violence stems from a myopic and relative perspective, where both sides believe with their whole being that what they're fighting for is just, and who they are fighting, a faceless, nameless meatbag that deserves no humanity, no backstory, no identity, because they are evil, and it is our duty, if not right, to remove them from this planet. Now, that's obviously a long-winded version of the motif, but I wanted to beat the dead horse here because it's obvious the writer's intention to do this, to ironically not just bring humanity to video game characters and video game bad guys, but even bring humanity to all the NPCs, the non-playable characters. So much so that they really worked on animating their faces, so if you're strangling them or stabbing them, you see the humanity leave their face. And these characters look just like you and me. Just people caught in a post-apocalyptic hell trying to survive. And if you listen closely, you hear their last gasps of air. Or if one of their friends sees their lifeless body on the ground, they will call for them by their name, with grief and now vengeance. And now that person, with a face you could recognize, with a name and a friend that you likely just killed too, well, you're just as bad as them, aren't you? And this is the cost of war, our own moral compass. When you see people, look in their eyes, when you really see their humanity, it is almost impossible to be cruel to them unless you're a sociopath. This is why online behavior is so toxic, because of the anonymity factor, the loss of humanity within these interactions. It's the same with driving a car. If somebody cuts you off in an enclosed steel box, you can, without thinking, tell that person, probably a little old lady, somebody's sweet grandma, to die because they're a piece of shit. But if someone accidentally bumps into you spilling coffee eye to eye in the elevator and you're stuck with them, most rational people will be either profusely sorry or faster to accept an apology before it can even be muttered. So long and short, this is an amazing concept to explore on this micro level with NPCs, but to really drive home this idea, we had to take the reins of this character, Abby, the same person we spend the first half of the game hunting down, looking to torture and murder her and everyone she loves. So when the tables are turned and we see what quote-unquote evils Joel has done to Abby, and then we see what motivates her, flaws and all, you begin to understand why she felt she needed to do what she did. And in many ways, the tragedy of the story is either Ellie nor Abby, who are completely blinded by vengeance, know how to let it go. Whereas the first game has a glimmer of hope in it, this game is just a straight tragedy. But for me, who is an optimist, this was the cliffhanger I needed, because now I'm looking forward to part 3 when it releases for the PlayStation 6 in like 2027, but I'm looking for the redemption, and I will happily helm Abby and steer Ellie to a fate of forgiveness. Now I long for that, in fact. I will say getting to play in Santa Barbara was such a relief. I was speculating throughout the game that part 3 would be all based in Santa Barbara with the Southern California aesthetic. And as I live in Los Angeles, the detail was astounding. Like, it really felt how I think my neighborhood would look if I was in that world, spores and all. And I'm sure if you live in Seattle, you must get that as well. Regardless, the game for a dozen different reasons was satisfying. From the gameplay, the setting shift at the end, and the added features, and the graphics alone, because this and Red Dead Redemption 2 are on a different level. And yet, the real fulfillment with this game landed squarely because of the risks taken within the story to emphasize the theme. Because although the game is as tragic as any story gets, it is so to purely satisfy the intent of the narrative. When we get so desensitized to violence, so stuck in our vantage point, that anybody that's not you or that's outside of your increasingly small bubble can be seen as an enemy or as an obstacle to your goal, then you've lost your humanity. And in a world with literal monsters and the fate of humankind hanging by a thread, our choices to see beyond factions, beyond tribes, and the sins of our past may actually be the only thing that can save the world. Not a possible cure created from Ellie's blood, but by her choice to stop spilling blood. And it's a lesson that is and will always be relevant, and I can fully understand giving us that perspective pisses a lot of people off, pushes people outside of their preconceived notions of justice and their expectations of the story. But it is an uncomfortable truth, for it is usually us, our role in our own lives, that continue our own suffering. Until we can see through others' eyes, walk in our supposed enemy's shoes, we will not just be prisoners of our own pain, but also the guards keeping us locked inside. And for that sentiment alone, I believe The Last of Us Part 2, while imperfect like all art, stories, and people, is a masterpiece, and a misunderstood one at that. Now, thank you for your time and attention. I have a ton more film breakdowns, reviews, and storytelling analyses on the way, so please consider liking. Thanks again. Bye, y'all. What do you think? This is my Joel cosplay. I especially didn't even shave, and I'm wearing this in 100-degree heat. So yeah, okay, bye.